welcome back. In the last class, we saw how NMR experiments can be performed by applying an RF radiation to the samples which are kept in a magnetic field, and the molecules go from the ground level alpha state to beta state, and when they come back they emit the signal known as free induction decay, which is captured and digitized, and finally it is Fourier transform to give the spectrum. So, we will look at today at the hardware, NMR hardware aspects. We will look at how an NMR spectrometer is built, what are the different components of this system, so that we get a feel of how experiments are performed. So, NMR spectroscopy has actually come a long way since this invention. So, it was discovered, the phenomenon of NMR was discovered as we showed in the last class in 1945, and since then the NMR instruments have really become more and more compact and more modern. So, you can see here some pictures of very old systems. This is now historical, and you can see how they developed. So, the current day systems what we have nowadays is something which looks like this. So, you have what is called a magnet. So, this is what is shown here. We will see more pictures of this as we move on. So, this is a superconducting magnet, and from here is where we keep the sample, and there is this portion, this box here is electronic components of which controls the sample and so on, the experiments, and all this data is finally analyzed in a computer which gives you the spectrum, and all the computer Fourier transform etc. is performed in the computer here. So, you can see this is basically the basic setup of an NMR spectrometer. So, let us look at each of these components in more detail. So, typically an NMR spectrometer consists of the following components. You have what is called, the most heart of the NMR system is the magnet. So, it is a superconducting magnet. We will look at this shortly. Then there are something called shim coils. Again we will talk about this in later slides. So, the superconducting magnet, when we say superconducting, basically there is a coil which is at a superconducting state, and that is kept in this state because of liquid helium. So, liquid helium has a very low temperature, at a very low temperature of 4 Kelvin, and at that temperature this material which current carries the coil current becomes superconducting, and we will see that shortly. The next major component of NMR spectrometer is probe. Probe is basically the part of the system which actually where you apply the RF pulse, you receive the signals, and you control the temperature and so on. So, we will also have a look at these components, and all this probe and magnet, whatever control we want to do is done by this electronics which is in the what is called as console. So, console is basically a box which contains all the different boards, different circuits and so on for generating the RF pulses. We have what is called gradient amplifiers and log system and so on. And finally, all the data which comes out which is basically collected by this hardware is after digitization is stored in the computer, where we do the processing and we analyze the spectrum, and that is how we come to look at the data. So, let us go one by one with each of the components. So, this is a basic schematic of a magnet. So, as we can see, magnet is basically a big diwar which looks like this, and this contains, so this is of course not in the dimension of the real size, this is a schematic figure. So, this particular thing we will see more in detail in next slide, contains basically the magnet, and in the middle of the magnet there is a bore, a hole through which we put the sample in, and then the sample the sample goes and sits inside the spectrometer, inside the magnet. There it is surrounded by what is called an RF coil. So, you can see this is a coil, and this RF coil is basically the coil where we apply the RF signal to the sample. This is used for transmitting the signal, transmitting the radiation to the sample, as well as collecting the signal from the sample. So, the same coil is used for both purposes, and that now whatever the signal which is induced, the current, that is the FID which is induced in these coils, are collected and digitized in the hardware, in the console which has all the electronic components, and from here the digitized data is sent to the computer where it is essentially done, the Fourier transformation and data processing is done. So, let us look at more closely to how a magnet in the interior of a magnet looks like. So, these are some pictures of modern day NMR systems. So, this is different types. You can see there are very huge ones which are tall magnets, typically about 12 to 15 feet in case of high field. So, you can see the numbers here basically denote the megahertz. So, if you recollect in the last few lectures we saw how does how is the magnet represented, I mean the magnetic field strength. We typically talk in terms of the proton frequency, and the proton frequency is given as in the megahertz regime. So, this is 900 megahertz, this could be some 700 and so on. So, this is some typical pictures of magnets in different labs around the world. So, if you look at, if you want to get a feel of the size of these magnets of these systems, so you can see here this is a 500 megahertz machine, and this is a person typically about, let us say, 6 feet tall. So, this is the size of a magnet, and when you go to higher field the magnet size goes up. So, this is basically because as it goes up it comes to that. So, this is the size of a bigger magnet. The size goes up because the superconducting coil inside this magnet occupies a larger width compared to what is a smaller magnet. So, we will see how these magnetic fields are generated in this particular systems. So, what happens is that if you look at this again, this picture of the Dewar, it has many concentric circles. So, this has many concentric Dewar inside its the main outside container. So, the innermost container, the innermost Dewar contains what is called as superconducting coils. So, superconducting coils are basically coils which are wound around in a circle, and these coils are dipped in liquid helium. So, this particular is surrounded by liquid helium here. So, when the liquid helium, in the presence of liquid helium, which is typically 4 Kelvin, this coil becomes superconducting, means it has no resistance to the current flowing in the coil, and this basically causes a magnetic field. So, whenever there is a current flowing in a coil, we have a magnetic field which is generated perpendicular to the plane of the coil, and therefore, if this plane of the coil is in this direction, if the plane is this xy, we can consider this vertical as a z axis, and the z axis the magnetic field is generated because of this current. Now, the reason it is superconducting is because we need to generate very high currents to generate very high magnetic field. So, typical magnetic field is about here is about 9 Tesla, 10 Tesla or even 20 Tesla in the case of high field magnets. So, for such high fields you cannot have an electromagnet which will generate lot of heat, and it cannot carry such high current density, and therefore, we need superconductivity, because in a superconducting state there is no resistance, and as current, depending on the current density of the coil, you can generate very high currents and very high magnetic field in the center. So, all the modern day NMR machine systems are basically superconducting systems. So, this is how it is done, right. So, there is a liquid helium surrounding this coil. We will see those pictures in the next slide. So, you can see this is a cutout of a magnet. So, this is old system which cut out from a not functioning machine. So, you can see the interior of this, it is like an anatomy of a magnet. So, if you see interior, so this is, you can see different layers of the magnet one inside the other, and you can see in the middle this the bore here, this is called a bore, and this hole runs from top of the magnet to the bottom, and you can see the coil surrounding this bore. So, this is basically the coil, and we will look at more closely this particular coil in the next slide. So, here is what is shown in the picture. So, you can see that this is the how the coils are wound around the machine. So, this is taken from this website, this particular picture. More details are also available if you log into this place. As you can innermost, this is how the coil looks like, and this is a very long coil which is wound very finely. So, it is actually making NMR magnets is really a rocket science in that sense. It is very difficult to, we have to make sure that there are no joints, and because joints generate resistance, and that will create problems when the current starts flowing, and these are the problems which is a very fine technology, and this coils are typically about a few feet long, and that is inserted into the innermost container. So, you see this container here which is surrounding this coil is the innermost, and you fill liquid helium around this, and liquid helium basically keeps this whole current and the coil in the superconducting state. And then around this this particular container you fill one more container which has a vacuum, so that the heat, so that this liquid helium which is inside this does not evaporate, because we want the liquid helium to stay there and not evaporate very rapidly, and therefore, we surround it by a vacuum, and then also we surround it by liquid nitrogen, which is another layer of Dewar around this. The liquid nitrogen helps in reducing the evaporation rate of liquid helium, and then again you have a vacuum and so on. So, you have different concentric layers to prevent the liquid helium inside the innermost container to start evaporating. But of course, one cannot avoid evaporation. So, liquid helium very slowly evaporates and one has to refill helium every few months or once in few months, because their slow evaporation is always unavoidable. In the modern day, there are systems where you can actually recirculate the liquid helium. So, whatever is evaporated, you can condense it and bring it back. So, you can have what is called a closed loop system, the closed system. The only thing is that it causes some kind of vibration. So, it is not very popular these days in for solution high resolution NMR, but when you go to MRI essentially relies on that. An MRI system, that is magnetic resonance imaging, which is as I said, it's a similar to what is NMR. There those systems are, the magnets are big, and there the system is closed system, and the helium whatever is evaporated from here slowly is brought back, condensed and brought back. So, this is how the NMR the magnet system works. So, let us move on to look at some of the features of this. How does the NMR magnet affect the sensitivity of NMR spectroscopy? So, these coils which I just now mentioned are surrounded which are superconducting. They are basically made of niobium titanium or niobium tin alloy, and making these alloys and this coil, as I said, is a very hot area of research. People are working on this because we have reached kind of a limit to generate very high magnetic field. So, there is a lot of work being done on how to increase the magnetic field. So, there is a work going on in the area of finding new types of alloys or high TC superconductors which can carry instead of liquid helium, we can do at liquid nitrogen temperature. So, that is one of the areas of research which is happening. And these magnets have to be on the vibration free, because what happens is our ground, even though we do not feel the vibrations, there is always some kind of motion of the ground, and that is transferred to the magnet. And if that is transferred to the magnet, the coil, then there is a lot of loss in signal to noise, or there is increase in the drift of the magnet and so on. So, therefore, the system has to be kept on a vibration free legs. So, this is a very important part of the whole machine. And then one has to keep in mind that how does this help, how does it help to have bigger and bigger magnets. So, when we say magnet, we talk about magnetic field, and that is given by this letter B0. This is what we have been using in the last few lectures, we have been seeing that. So, when you increase B0, the magnetic field increases by to the power 3 by 2. So, this is an important point here. It is not just linear increase, it is increased by a factor of 3 by 2, and this is tremendous. So, if you go from 500 megahertz to 800 megahertz, although you have gone only by 60%, you actually double the sensitivity. So, sensitivity is basically the holy grail in NMR. There is always there is a push for going to higher and higher sensitivity, and therefore, a lot of money has and research goes on in how to increase the magnetic field, and that is a major focus. The more the frequency, the other thing which we will see later along when we go along the course is that as you increase B0, one more important gain what you get is resolution. So, not only increasing the magnetic field improves the sensitivity by this factor, but it also increases resolution linearly. So, here it is a straight linear relation. So, as you double the magnetic field, you double the resolution. And what is the resolution? Resolution is basically how easily can you separate two lines, two peaks in an NMR spectrum. So, we will see that more in the coming slides. And one important part of magnetic field is, even though we say that it is particular Tesla, let us say we make a magnet with 9 Tesla, it never remains at 9 Tesla throughout. It slowly starts losing, because remember, it is a current magnetic field generated by current. It is not permanent magnet, it is a superconducting magnet where the current is flowing in the coil, and this results in slow loss of magnetic field with respect to function of time. Typically the drift, we use the word drift for this case, and we will use this word later on to how we improve how we correct for this drift, and this drift is typically 8 to 10 hertz per hour. And this is a very important point, is because in 1 hour this means is in 1 hour the magnet has become less by 10 hertz. So, instead it is a 900 megahertz, it loses 10 hertz let us say in 1 hour. So, this is typically the drift rate for a good magnet, for a new magnet, and the reason is that the lines which we observe, the peaks which we observe in an NMR spectrum is also typically of this magnitude. So, therefore, if we do not correct for this drift, our lines will have an additional 10 hertz broadening increase, and that causes a resolution problem, and therefore, there is a mechanism to correct for this drift in real time. So, the thing is, we are correcting for the drift in the spectrum, but we do not correct it in reality, in the sense the magnetic field continues to change, to drift, but internally we try to correct it by applying a mechanism which we will see that. So, this is the schematic of the console which I mentioned, which contains the hardware, that electronics part. So, you can see there are different components. We will not be able to go in detail for each and every component, but the major three things which we will look at today is basically this, what is called a lock system, and this is called shim coils and a probe. So, let us look at a probe first. What is a probe? Probe, if you again refer to this diagram which we looked at for the magnet, in the center of the magnet there is what is called a bore, a hole. So, that bore runs all the way from top to the bottom, and that bore is what contains a thing called probe. So, this is this green color thing which is shown in a T shape. This is what is shown in a real picture of a probe. It looks like this. So, probe is essentially the hardware part where we put the sample. So, you see this arrow where is pointing now, this is where the sample is stored. So, when you drop the sample, we drop it from here, from the top of the magnet, it comes all the way down and it sits somewhere here, and that this part is this part here, this black color here, the coil. So, you can see this is called an RF coil. The RF coil is the one which, now when the sample is sitting in the middle, the RF coil generates energy, transmits the RF radiation to the sample, and also receives receives the energy from the sample, the signal from the sample, and this signal is further converted, and this is how these are different capacitors and resistance, and this is this signal which comes out is then digitized and further taken into the next part of the spectrometer. So, this is probe is a very important part, because this is where we actually apply the energy to the sample, and that is where the resonance concept comes into picture. So, we will look at more of this probe. So, this is how a sample tube sample looks like. So, this is how we insert a sample. So, this typically the height of this tube what you see here is about 6 to 7 inches, and the sample is at the bottom part of this tube. So, this is how a sample will look like, and this is how a tube looks like, and then you insert this in the top of the magnet, and it comes all the way down and it sits here and in the probe. So, this is again a figure drawing of a probe. So, in the modern day spectrometers, NMR spectrometers, there are two types of probes which one should know. One is called room temperature probe. Room temperature, as the name suggests, it basically the probe is at the room temperature, means it is operating at the regular temperature. It can increase a little bit higher, you can go to higher temperature, or it can be lower to probably 0 degrees or little lower also. So, this is called a room temperature probe, because the probe as such is at room temperature and the sample temperature can be varied, but this is a standard operation. But nowadays we have what is called very sensitive cryogenic probes. So, in this kind of probes, what happens is the RF coil which we saw in the previous slide is actually cooled. It is not in room temperature, it is cooled to a very low temperature by helium gas. So, that is the gas, this is not liquid, and the helium gas is typically kept at this temperature of 15 to 25 Kelvin. And why is that done? This is done because when you cool an electronic system, you decrease the noise. The noise which comes from thermal noise is reduced, and therefore, when you look at signal to noise, if the denominator, if the noise goes down, the signal to noise goes up, because noise in the denominator. So, this is what basically we are trying to achieve. The signal is not changed, the sample signal, remember signal comes from the sample. We will look at this also later. The signal comes from the sample and the magnet, the signal height, but the noise is essentially because of the different contributions from thermal noise and electronics, and that is reduced if you go down to low temperatures. So, we increase signal to noise. So, this is a very important concept, because this is what the modern day probes spectrometers at high field. So, when you go beyond 500 megahertz like 600, 700, 800 and a gigahertz, those kind of system invariably nowadays are come with cryogenic probes. So, again this is more detail about a probe, how it looks like. So, basically the main point here is that these coils, they actually wrap around the sample. So, you can't have, the sample is very tightly wrapped around by this coil, and that is called a filling factor, and these are different more technical details. So, essentially the point here is that the sample is very close to the coil, and whatever signal is given emitted from the sample is immediately taken up by the coil which is in the vicinity. So, this is the picture of a coil. So, this is a Helmholtz coil. So, you can see this is how the coil is built and the sample is sitting in the center, that is how we insert the sample, and the effective volume of the sample is shown here. So, and this transmits the current in the perpendicular direction. So, if you can remember this idea which we discussed in the last class, the RF radiation which is applied is always applied perpendicular to B0. So, you see the B0 is facing in the z axis, in the vertical z direction, and the current the radiation RF pulse which we apply is always perpendicular to B0. So, it can be either in the x direction or y, but this will be always in the z. So, this is how these currents are applied. The RF coils actually again depends on what kind of nucleus you are studying. So, sometimes we study hydrogen, we are looking at proton, we look at carbon 13, we may look at fluorine, 19 fluorine, or we may be studying phosphorus and silver and so on. So, there are varieties, as we saw in the very first class, that this is called NMR periodic table. We have the entire periodic table, many elements are amenable to NMR spectroscopy, and therefore, one has to now generate frequencies which are tuned to the frequency of a particular nucleus. For example, when I say 500 megahertz, 500 megahertz is basically a frequency of our hydrogen, but for carbon it will not be 500, it will be 125 megahertz. Similarly, for nitrogen it will be 50 megahertz. So, therefore, for different type of nucleus we need to have different type of frequencies, and all this is done with a single probe. The same probe has to be used for different nuclei, we do not change the probe. So, therefore, each time when you study carbon 13 or you study nitrogen fluorine or nitrogen, you will have to tune, it is like a radio, like we tune the radio to different frequencies. Similarly, the coils have to be tuned to different frequencies, so that we get maximum benefit or sensitivity for studying that particular kind of coil. So, this is a basic idea behind RF coil, and the next important thing in NMR is what is called shimming. In shimming, what happens is the following. So, you have this again a schematic of a sample which goes and sits in the center of the magnet, and here what happens is there are this whole sample is now surrounded by magnetic field. Remember, the magnetic field is throughout and it is in the z direction, but you can see in this picture the molecule, let us say this sample contains some molecules, and one molecule sitting in the bottom of the tube experiences some kind of a magnetic field which is not the same as the magnetic field experienced by a molecule here. Therefore, these two molecules will not have the same magnetic field, and because of this equation omega equal to gamma B0, if B0 is different here and here, then omega also becomes different here and here, and that basically causes line broadening. The lines will look broad, we will see that in the next slide also. So, to avoid that kind of a difference, we have to make the system uniform, means homogeneous. The magnetic field has to be same every part of the sample, similar. So, remember, this blue portion which is shown here is only about 2 centimeters long, which is 20 millimeters. So, in that particular portion of the sample, we want to keep the magnetic field as homogeneous or as same throughout the sample, and that process of going from this inhomogeneity to this homogeneous state is known as shimming. So, shimming is the word used for. So, this is basically done by electronics. We have a lot of coils which are sitting in the sample, around the sample, and those these coils, these are not the RF coils, but these are called shim coils. So, these shim coils are operated in an automated manner to generate this particular homogeneity. So, this is a very important point which is shown here. You can see this is an NMR sample tube, and here the different, let us say we are looking at a particular molecule. So, we are looking at CH3 and different CH3s and the same molecule, CH3 here sitting here, one molecule, another molecule is here, another molecule is here, and because they are located in different parts of the sample, if the homogeneity is not good, then each CH3 will have a different frequency, because each CH3 has different B value. So, because of that you get something like this, a peak which looks very broad and difficult to analyze, but if I do a shimming, in a shimming process we actually make the magnetic field equal everywhere. So, that is what we saw in the last slide, and if you do that with different shim coils. So, here for example, there is a shim coil name given, Z1 shim, Z2 shim, etc. By doing those kind of shimming, you get a very nice line shape, and this is very sharp, and this is what is very important for analyzing. So, we cannot analyze or interpret this kind of a spectrum in solution. Remember, we are all talking about this in solution state. In solid state the matter is different, where the lines are inherently broad, but we are only talking about solution NMR, and there you can see that this particular line is very sharp, nice, and can be analyzed. So, shimming is very important process, and nowadays is done automatically by the computer with very less of manual intervention. So, the other thing which we looked at, I showed you, is what is called lock. So, this is required because remember I mentioned in the last few slides that the magnetic field drifts with time. No magnetic field can be constant throughout. So, it always drifts to some extent, sometimes it is as low as 5, sometimes it can be as high as 20 hertz per hour. So, because the lines which we are studying, the peaks which we are studying are very narrow, we cannot afford to have this drift happening. So, we have to correct for this drift. So, how do we correct for this drift? This drift is corrected as follows. So, what you do is in your sample you have to add a little amount of deuterium. So, for example, many of the solvents which we use, like so if you use water, you can add deuterium oxide D2O, which is a heavy water, that is a little bit, it has to be about 5%, not more than 5%, or you can use completely a deuterated solvent, like example 100% of D2O. Well, typically in the organic chemistry people use the solvents called as methanol or chloroform. This is CHCl3. In a chloroform you can have a CdCl3, means that H is replaced by deuterium. So, the whole solvent is now deuterated. So, what you do next is the system looks at a deuterium signal. So, a deuterium signal looks something like this, and this signal is monitored with respect to time. So, if the magnetic field drifts, that means the magnetic field reduces, then this line will also shift, because the magnetic field, remember, omega is equal to gamma B0. So, if B0 changes, omega will also change, and omega is nothing but frequency. So, this peak starts moving around if there is a drift in the magnet. So, what is done is there is a correction done. The current is supplied to a coil, in the lock coil, which is the word used, lock coil here, such that this drift is subtracted. For example, if it moves in the left direction, a current is supplied so that this peak goes back to this direction, because when you supply a current you are applying a magnetic field. So, if the main magnetic field shifts by some amount, you can nullify it by applying a small current in the negative direction and move the peak back. Similarly, if the peak moves in this direction, you can apply a little extra current so that you add to the magnetic field and it comes back here. So, this is done in real time. That means, when you are recording your spectrum, this continuously keeps happening in the background, and that is called a lock, drift correction. So, lock is basically, the word lock means you are locking the magnetic field to a particular value, and this is a very important point because this has to be done for every sample every time we record NMR data, and again this is done typically in solution state, because the drift which I said matters most in solution, not in solid state. So, this lock correction is mainly applicable to solution NMR. So, there is another important thing is called gradients. If you again in MRI we rely on images. So, this is mainly helpful in MRI as well as in new NMR experiments. In NMR experiments we want to do sometimes what is called solvent separation, water separation. As we go on we will see this more in detail. There we have a small gradient. This is gradient is nothing but a coil is on the RF coil. So, in the RF coil you see here is a small gradient which is a current is flown in this coil, a current is flown in this coil which generates a magnetic field. So, you see this is very similar to the superconducting, but it is not a superconducting coil, it is a room temperature, and a small magnetic field is generated in the z axis. So, we will see the applications of this in the later, and finally, when we look at the FID, so this is how the FID comes out of the spectrometer, and you see the spectrometer gives you a signal like this. This is called an FID, and as I mentioned in the last class, we actually digitize the FID. So, the FID is actually taken at every point here, and this is called digitization, and this is how the signal will look like. So, you see this is like a sine wave, but it is now discretized, digitized, and the distance between 2 points, between two successive points is known as dwell time, and this dwell time is again very important parameter when you set up NMR experiments. So, this is very useful to keep in mind, and this FID is sampled. So, we use the word sampling, we sampled at regular intervals. So, this is finally this digital data is what is given to the computer, and that is finally what is Fourier transformed, and a spectrum is given to you. So, this digitization is essentially carried out by what is called an ADC, analog to digital converter. So, this is how it digitizes the signal FID, and it is stored in the computer. So, this basically brings us to the end of the hardware. This was a very brief overview of what a hardware, NMR hardware looks like. There are many more details which one can go into, but as far as practical aspects are concerned, we have looked at the main components. Now we will move on to the interpretation. In the next class we will move on to the interpretation of a 1D, how a simple 1D experiment spectrum looks like, and we will start looking at the different signatures in a 1D.